Hello and welcome to episode 360 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Ian, you jinxed it.
I did. I'm sorry.
You did. I merely alluded to the fact that there was the potential of possibly having the chair of the NTSB on this week. You just said it outright. And you can't do that.
I tempted the wrath of the thing high atop of the whatever, and look where we are. So, yeah. Sorry.
What we mean to say is that interview is postponed once again. Turns out that Jennifer Homendy is a busy person in a busy, important position, and sometimes things unbelievably more important than us come up. So
let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just other things.
We don't know why. Yeah, other things come up. It's no telling how important they are, but hopefully we will be able to reschedule in the near future this time and get that interview finally conducted. But not for lack of having everything else to talk about.
Oh boy.
You mentioned last week, hey, should we talk about the ramp up of all the U.S. military aircraft and equipment going to the Middle East? And we said, nah, nothing's happened yet. So we don't really have anything to talk about. Something's happened, and now we have something to talk about.
Yes, indeed.
As it relates to commercial aviation.
Let's get into it. So what has happened so far? On the morning of February 28th, the U.S. and Israel launched a coordinated set of attacks on Iran, which led to Iranian response, which then cascaded into a region-wide shutdown of commercial air travel. Airspace in Iran, obviously, Israel, also obviously, Iraq, pretty obviously, all shut down, but also Syria, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Then a partial shutdown of Saudi Arabian airspace. So what are we actually talking about? At the moment, so we're speaking on Wednesday, March 4th, this could all be not closed, or it could be more closed by the time we get to Friday when the podcast comes out. So this is just where we started and where we are now. So Iran, totally closed. The FIR is completely closed. The NOTAMs list a variety of things for Tehran, but my favorite NOTAM right now is that Iran cautions that the potential for the extension of conflict over high seas within the Tehran FIR in the Persian Gulf and Oman Sea, quote, as the result of security reason.
Yes. I mean, kudos
Accurate.
for telling it how it is, I guess, right? Can't fault him for that.
So Iranian airspace is closed. Iraqi airspace is also completely closed for maybe not necessarily obvious reasons. The reason that Iraqi airspace is closed is because it sits directly between Iran and Israel, where there are missiles, drones.
It's not somewhere you want to be.
Yeah, you don't want to be operating commercially there. We've seen that in the past, and it hasn't been good. So Iraq's airspace is completely closed. Israel's airspace is completely closed except for the flights that they are allowing. So at this point, there's very limited traffic coming out of Tel Aviv. There are a few commercial flights a day. El Al is operating some services to places in Europe. So right now, Athens is one of them. Budapest is another, as well as cargo flights to and from Tel Aviv. The United States military is also basing some aircraft out of Tel Aviv. So the airport's active, just not generally and commercially.
Yeah, well, some cargo flights are squeaking out as well.
Right.
So one just launched, actually, going over to Belgium, only very late. But cargo flights, cargo pilots, they sometimes are not thought of as human, and it's fine for them to operate. I'm sure they are well aware of the situation, but cargo, for the most part, seems to always be on the side of, well, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, well, boxes don't mind bumps, but they do mind ballistic missiles.
They do. They really do.
Jordanian airspace was partially closed for a time. Then it went to a timed closure. So it was closed basically overnight for a few days. Now it is pretty much open without restriction. Syrian airspace was closed completely. Now it is closed completely except for flights to and from Aleppo. Those flights need to follow very specific routing into and out of Aleppo. Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar airspace remains completely closed. Airspace in the United Arab Emirates is a bit of a patchwork of special security areas. But what has happened now is that they've carved out what they're calling safe zones, where aircraft can arrive and depart from Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah along very specific routings and arrive from very specific routings as well. That has allowed Dubai and Abu Dhabi to restart some limited operations. And when I say limited operations,
limited.
Dozens of flights out of the normal more than 1,200 daily flights at Dubai alone.
Yeah, I don't really understand how they're able to restart flights out of Dubai and to a much, much lesser extent Abu Dhabi, as this is one of the first times, if not the first time, we've seen actual commercial passenger terminals and airports impacted by this ongoing conflict. I believe Kuwait and one of Dubai International's terminals were actually hit by rockets and took damage. So how they're getting these flights in and out of Dubai safely, or at least they say safely, I have no idea, because the airports themselves have taken hits by rockets. So none of this really makes sense to me. But if you want to get out of Dubai or if you want to get out of Abu Dhabi, there are very, very few number of flights that I don't even know how you book.
Yeah, you would had to have booked it before. Emirates says, don't call us, we'll call you, is basically how they're operating these flights right now. So they're saying, in no way, shape, or form should you come to the airport unless we have directly contacted you and said you have a seat, you can come to the airport, just because the situation is so fraught.
Yeah, and if you're on, or if you had been booked on pretty much any other airline, you're out of luck, as I don't think any airline other than Emirates and Etihad have operated any flights. And of course, both of these airports are quite large, and the airlines themselves have flight crews stuck and stranded there, as there were many, many flights on the way to the region when the conflict began that turned around and went back, either diverted elsewhere or diverted all the way back. We might have some new entrants for world's longest return to point of origin. I think an Air Canada flight had an 18-hour air return. Not great, but it's not like anyone gets advance notice of, hey, we're going to start that war at about 6 p.m. tomorrow. So if you plan on flying in or out, like, get it done before then. No, this happened without any notice, of course. And there were a full day's flight schedule operating on the way to the region that had to either park elsewhere or return. And oof, that's a long day.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dubai has seen an increase in traffic today. I'm looking at the departures today, mostly Fly Dubai flights actually operating out of Dubai. There have been some repatriation flights operated by SmartWings. We'll get to that in a moment. Aeroflot is operating out of Dubai. And we've got, let's see, Air India, Fitz Air, out of Colombo in Sri Lanka. So that's interesting. Uzbekistan Airways, Iraqi Airways, Middle East Airlines, Air Arabia, Cyprus, and then obviously a lot of Emirates. So slowly ramping up to accommodate more and more flights, but still nowhere near normal. So on February 26th at Dubai, there were 1,240 total movements, split nearly evenly between takeoffs and landings. That number on the 28th of February, the day that the war started, that fell to 674 total movements, so about 50%. March 1st, nothing. March 2nd, there were 20 total movements at Dubai International. Yesterday, on Tuesday the 3rd, we ramped up to 83. And on Wednesday today, so it's already Thursday morning there, so Wednesday total local time, 161 movements at Dubai International. So just a little over 10% of normal. So things are nowhere near normal there. Where things are busier than normal, though, is in Oman, where Muscat has become the hub for repatriation and evacuation flights because that airspace remains open. We have seen a dramatic increase in business jet activity out of Muscat. It's working on the data now, but it's so many flights. There have also been repatriation and evacuation flights operated by SmartWings, Enter Air out of Poland, British Airways, Air France, KLM, Lufthansa. British Airways is operating a total of 3 flights over the next 3 days, and all of those have sold out, as you can imagine. So just a massive amount of disruption. So how disruptive is this? At the major airports in the affected countries where airspace has been closed or severely restricted, we're talking roughly 3,400 flights a day, hundreds of thousands of passengers each and every day. And that's just the major airports. That doesn't include all of the flights, all of the airports. That's just the major airports. So it's an immense amount of disruption. And the longer this goes on, the more disruptive it's going to be. Because then we're going to start talking about how is this affecting not just schedules and where the aircraft are and things like that, but how is this affecting the ability of these airlines to continue being airlines? In a lot of these cases, most of these airlines have government backstops that they can look to in the event of continued disruption and things like that. But it still becomes a very, very difficult place to be. So that's one of the things that we're going to be keeping an eye on over the next week, 2 weeks, however long this lasts.
Yeah, especially Etihad and Qatar Airways and Emirates, they're going to be fine. But some of the smaller airlines in the Middle East, like Oman Air, Kuwait Airways, they don't have the kind of massive financial backing as the ME3 do. So they're just going to have to weather it out, and hopefully they can, because we have no idea how long this will last. It could be, you know what, I was going to say it could be done by the time this podcast comes out, but I don't think there's even a slim remote chance of that happening. This is a very different conflict than we saw last time, where the US hurls some rockets at Iran and Iran hurls some rockets back. And no, this is as close to, if not a full-scale war as there could possibly be. And the aviation industry, really outside of Russia and Ukraine, hasn't seen anything this disruptive or unknown. How long is this going to last? We have no idea. It's not like Ukraine is the massive commercial aviation hub, the global hub that the Middle East has become. This has far-reaching consequences to pretty much every country in the world. I don't know if there are any countries in the world not served by Qatar, Etihad, and Emirates. If not, they probably don't have much service to begin with. But this is very far-reaching, not just for people going to or from the Middle East, but of course connecting through the region to get from A to B via Middle East. This is going to be a problem for a long time, unless you happen to be booked on one of the Fifth Freedom flights, which is an interesting little quirk to this story, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's at some point you have to do all that you can just to keep the airline moving. And in some cases, that means flying from Newark to Athens.
Over and over.
Or wherever you can.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, the Fifth Freedom flights that Emirates operates are mostly still running.
Yeah, there's a good chunk of them. Some I'm just learning exist. Miami to Bogota, Athens to Newark, Milan to JFK on an A380. These aircraft all would have, during normal times, continued on to Dubai and rotated elsewhere in the global network. But they are essentially, at this point, cut off from the rest of the world. So all these, for instance, A6EUB right now is an A380 doing nothing but flying between Milan and JFK. There are a couple 777s that are, again, tied to the Bogota-Miami route. I think there's one between like Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, a 777 that's, again, just going back and forth. Best to operate what you can. Just kind of, that must be a very weird feeling to be booked only on, let's say, JFK to Milan on Emirates, thinking like, oh no, my flight's going to be canceled, my vacation's ruined. But actually, no, this A380 is just operating completely on schedule without any issue, as long as it just doesn't try to continue on to Dubai. Very interesting quirk to this story.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that these aircraft are just basically taxis now between different cities that you wouldn't normally see them just operating back and forth.
And also the flight and cabin crews. I'm not exactly sure how exactly it's working with their flight and cabin crews. They must have multiple crews on the ground in their Fifth Freedom locations, because I haven't seen so much as a delay, let alone a cancellation. So here you have an Emirates flight and cabin crew that normally globetrots to every corner of the world. And now all they're doing is Newark to Athens and back and forth and back and forth. Hopefully not forever, but that's an interesting twist of fate.
Huh. All right. I didn't think about the cabin crew aspect of it earlier. Let's talk now about some of the other effects, and we'll start with diverted flights. There were hundreds of flights in the air to and from airports that almost instantaneously closed. And there were some long diversions.
Yeah, we alluded to some, but do you actually have some like numbers of maybe the longest diversion? Because there were a lot.
There were a lot. So we had the longest, I think, was the Air Canada diversion. But then we also had Emirates from San Francisco making it all the way to Europe and then saying, okay, nope, we're going to Munich. And there were also a few that turned back from the US. So, I mean, overall, the longest, I think, was over 16 hours.
Oof.
Just really, really not great.
Yeah, at least this Air Canada flight, AC56, made it from Toronto all the way to over the middle of Ireland before turning around and heading all the way back to Toronto. That's a long way. I feel like I saw longer than that.
I'm not sure.
No way to know.
Which one did you see?
I don't know. Maybe that was the longest. I don't know. 2 transatlantic crossings for the price of 1 ticket. That's something, right?
What more could you ask for?
Oh, so much.
If we track down that long one, we'll stick it in the show notes. I'm sure we've got someone who can figure that out. But outside of diversions, Air India is once again just suffering. They are one of the most affected airlines that's still operating flights because of their inability to operate through Pakistani airspace. They can't take advantage of the northern corridor. So the southern corridor, it is. And now that they can't use Iranian airspace, they're going through Saudi Arabia, which means that a lot of their westbound flights that weren't already making fuel stops are now making fuel stops, and some eastbound flights as well. So just not a great situation to be in for Air India, especially.
Yuck. I can see the flight to Toronto stopped in Vienna. The flight from New York to Mumbai, hey, it's actually making it nonstop. That's good. But the flight to Newark stopped in Rome. Yeah, if an airline that just really can't catch a break. It also had some flights. We were just speaking a moment ago about diversions, but maybe it was yesterday, the day before, so that would have been Monday. There were a number of flights that took off bound for Dubai because they had a narrow window, I guess, and then something changed. So they diverted back to India and then something changed again. So they re-diverted back towards the UAE. What I would give to hear the passengers' reaction to, sorry, folks, we can't continue on to Dubai. It's not safe to do that. So we're turning back to India. And then an hour later, well, folks, it's not dangerous in Dubai anymore. So we're going to turn around and continue on. Just what is the mindset of the passengers at that point who think they're returning to India only to turn back around again because it's magically safe now? I don't know. This whole situation is just preposterous to me right now.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah, it's the only one I got.
Yeah. Air India, though, isn't the only airline that could potentially be impacted by lack of access to Pakistani airspace. We were already going to talk about this particular thing after last week's show because Afghanistan and Pakistan have come into active conflict.
Again.
And while there have been no NOTAMs issued and the airspace warnings remain as they were previously, it does have the potential to increase the risk and perhaps lead to the potential closure of transit of Afghanistan and Pakistan by international overflights. That would take out one of the only remaining links between Europe and Asia as far as international air traffic.
Very little left. I guess there's that corridor that goes through Saudi Arabia and transit Omani airspace, but that would be it. And it's, believe it or not, pretty crowded there already.
Right. So at the moment, there's the Northern Corridor A and Northern Corridor B, and then there's the Southern Corridor. So the Northern Corridor A is the one that passes through Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and then splits off further north and goes through Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and into China. So those are flights that are generally flying to northern China, as well as Japan and South Korea. Northern Corridor B goes through Turkey, Azerbaijan, then turns south, heads through Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. Those are flights that are going obviously to India, as well as places like Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, etc. The Southern Corridor has mainly been used for flights that are coming from Western Europe, and those flights are transiting through Egypt, Saudi Arabia, many flying to airspace that is now closed, trying to land at places like Dubai or Doha or Abu Dhabi, and then some traveling on through into India and other places in Southeast Asia. So we're down to like 2.5 ways to get from Europe to Asia and vice versa, which is not great, given that one of those ways is also a potential conflict zone. One of the other effects that we've seen of all the airspace closures are air defenses against GPS-based weaponry. And that's resulted in a lot of funky GPS spoofing artifacts that we're seeing on Flight Radar 24. There have been aircraft that are flying perfect circles at 10 knots at 36,000 feet. There have been aircraft that have been writing scribble signatures on their air routes in between places like Oman and Saudi Arabia. So just an overwhelming amount of GPS jamming and spoofing taking place right now in the region. Something that we're certainly aware of. One of the ways that we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible is we now calculate MLAT on every position, or every signal when we can, and default to MLAT when an aircraft is being jammed or spoofed.
Hey, Ian, what's MLAT?
I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting there.
I thought you forgot. Not everyone knows everything like you.
We're getting there. So we calculate MLAT when aircraft are experiencing GPS spoofing, so that when aircrafts can't send their position to us, we calculate it for them. So here's what MLAT is, Jason. MLAT takes multiple receivers. So in our case, we need at least 3 receivers to see the aircraft at the same time, so that we can calculate the position of the aircraft for that aircraft without relying on GPS-based ADS-B position data, which in a lot of cases, especially in Saudi Arabia, south of the UAE right now, is erroneous. So we calculate the position using multiple receivers, the time difference of arrival of the signal from the aircraft to multiple receivers. That lets us do things like calculate MLAT. The higher the aircraft is in real life, the more likely we are to be able to calculate MLAT. So that's why when you look at Dubai right now or Abu Dhabi, you're seeing aircraft where the flight path looks normal, perfectly normal, until about 6,500 feet. And then it gets a bit more difficult. And then once the aircraft gets below the jamming or gets close enough to the receivers in the city, we're calculating MLAT back again, or we're getting better ADS-B data. So it's a constant battle to try and get the best track possible in the face of significant GPS interference.
Yeah, and one thing I find particularly interesting is you can take a look at the GPS jamming map that FR24 has published, and you can see past dates, February 26th, the whole region is green, including up into Iran where there is coverage, no issues. February 27th, all green. February 28th, a lot of the Middle East, Qatar, UAE airspace turns red with high interference. March 1st, of course, the interference levels ramp up, but the low interference, green, happy areas they virtually disappear, not because there isn't jamming there. It's just there's no data because
No data.
There's no airplanes to track whether there's interference or not. I'm sure if we could source data for Iran, the whole damn thing would be red. But there's just no aircraft there. So we can only assume it's probably a lot of interference. But that level of jamming and spoofing over the UAE and Qatar and the rest of the Middle East is not normal, at least up until February 28th, where actual combat started. And now pretty much everything you see is maybe it's real, maybe it's not. Maybe they're not there at all.
One of the things to point out is that the reason for this GPS jamming and GPS spoofing is to counter GPS-based weaponry that is attempting to use a global navigation system to guide itself to blow something up. And so one of the ways that you can counter this is by jamming or spoofing the GPS signal. That has second order effects on commercial aviation, which is what we're more concerned with. But that's why GPS is being interfered with in these locations.
Yeah. Don't know if it's working or not. If it is, that's great. And I guess things could be a lot worse than they are now. But by the looks of it, it's not doing all that much other than making it a pain for us, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, the law of large numbers, I don't know, how effective it is, and maybe somebody else can write that report. But the last thing that I want to talk about in regard to what's happening in the Middle East right now is where the spillover into commercial aviation outside of the region becomes most important. And that is oil and jet fuel prices. At the moment, the price of oil and the price of jet fuel is rising without limit, so to speak. We've seen the price of jet fuel almost double within the past few days.
Whoops.
So that's not great. That's not to say that most airlines don't already have jet fuel contracts in place, but spot prices are rising very quickly.
Those don't last forever.
Exactly. The Strait of Hormuz is blocked, which prevents a lot of oil and gas coming out of there. But anytime there's a supply shock, you're going to see ripple effects, even if you're not necessarily taking that fuel from that location. So that is certainly something that we're going to be paying attention to. How does the rising price of oil, the rising price of jet fuel impact how airlines are pricing their tickets? Because at some point, if not today, if not tomorrow, but at some point, those price increases are going to come to your ticket price as well.
Yep, whether you want it to or not.
Let's leave the Middle East for now, and I'm sure we'll be back next week. But other things are in fact happening in the industry.
No.
Earlier this week, a United Airlines 787 returned to Los Angeles shortly after takeoff because of a quote-unquote engine issue. That engine issue has not been described further by the FAA, nor has it been described further by United Airlines. However, there was a small fire involved. The aircraft took off at 10:43 a.m. and landed back at LAX by 11:19. So they did not get far. Unfortunately, as we have seen many a time, multiple passengers had not only their carry-on baggage, but kitchen sinks. One passenger had a mule. Like it was just, where do people get these things, Jason?
I don't know. When I first read this story, I automatically assumed, this must have been a 32-year-old 767 because, United. Of course it is. But no, I was shocked to see it was a 787. But the video we saw of the evacuation was very, very calm, very kind of slow. Probably because so many people right there in the video didn't just have like a backpack. They had a full-on roller board with them, which is just insane. I hope the flight attendants were flogging passengers on their way out, smack them over the head for slowing evacuation down. But I didn't see any reports of any injuries. But yeah, we've seen a couple of these evacuations recently. A JetBlue A320, again, Newark, involved Newark, returned to Newark and evacuated between the two runways and shut everything down for a couple hours. Didn't see any video out of that, but these happen. You always think these events can't possibly happen to me, and I'll never be on a flight with this, but it happens quite a bit.
Yeah. So everyone was safe, no reported injuries, and the FAA is investigating. Now we get
we're
to
going to
come
Chicago. Yes.
all the way home to me, to Chicago, because United's been hitting American over the head, and American's been trying to get its arms outside of its sleeve, barely.
Actually, I think it's been more like United is grabbing a hold of American's arm and using it to hit American with its own hand. Like,
quit hitting
yourself. Quit hitting
Stop
yourself.
hitting yourself.
It feels more like that to me.
It's been real rough for American. And what's happening here is that United and American have been in a schedules race to operate as many flights as they possibly can in Chicago, because for a long time, American didn't really pay attention to its Chicago hub, and United did, and ended up being able to take over a bunch of gates that previously belonged to American. American said, hey, you can't do that. And there was a lot of back and forth, and it turns out that, yes, United could. Then what American did is they went and scheduled a ton of flights. Then United said, okay, we can do that too, and scheduled even more. Late last week, the FAA stepped in and said, okay, there's no way that you are going to even be able to operate a portion of these and keep them on time and keep this airport moving. So we are going to figure this out and come up with a number that works for everybody.
Oh, you're getting the full Newark treatment. That's not good for anyone.
American has put out a letter that blamed United for, quote, reckless scheduling, operating flights, quote, well beyond what it can operationally handle. That comes after United CEO Scott Kirby basically said, we're going to schedule as many flights as it takes to bury them. Quote, we are not going to allow them to win a single gate at our expense. We are going to add as many flights as are required to keep our gate count the same in Chicago. So,
yeah. I feel like we say this every week, but Brett Snyder and Cranky Flyer has a great write-up about the impending Chicago O'Hare gridlock. They say on any given half an hour, the FAA says you can operate about 100 movements at O'Hare. In the past, last year, there were very few half-hour slots where the schedule went over that 100 limit. But in the upcoming July, or I guess really summer 2026 schedule, it's pretty much the entire day where that 100 operation threshold is broken, which means if there's a cloud over Peoria in the morning, that's it for O'Hare. There's no recovery. There's no slack built into the schedule. So if there's a 2-hour delay at the beginning of the day, that's going to stagger all throughout the entire day, and there's no chance to recover. And that's just not good for anyone, because then you end up like Newark, and no one wants to be Newark. No one wants to be Newark. So at this point, Brett kind of goes on to say, well, this is probably exactly what United wanted, to load the schedule with flights it knows it was never going to operate, only to come and have the FAA come in and say, guys, you gotta reduce your schedules. Well, okay, United's going to reduce its already overly inflated schedule, and so will American, and United will come out on top still at the end and operate a still chaotic, overcrowded schedule, but more than American, which only matters to the bean counters at United and American. I don't think anyone else cares about this, but
I care that I'm not going to get, a 5-time daily flight to Traverse City.
Yeah, or Kalamazoo or Lansing or any of these other cities that don't need 5 daily service. Looking at you, Milwaukee, that's way more than 5. But it's got to come down, because if there's going to be a single storm cell anywhere in the Midwest, O'Hare is going to be a disaster, more so than usual. Even though you have like 19 runways, it's not going to help.
We need more runways.
Need more runways. That's true. You need a runway that goes all the way to LA, so you never have to take off.
We're working on it. Let's go back to 2024.
Oh, no, please, no.
When a LATAM 787 experienced an in-flight upset.
Oh, this is the one they blamed on like mechanical something or something, right?
Right. So something happened. There was a sudden altitude decrease and then a concurrent increase. As it turns out, it was in fact the fault of a flight attendant who leaned on the back of the captain's chair. The rocker switch that controlled the movement, the forward and aft movement of the captain's chair wasn't covered. Flight attendant leaned on that seat and the pilot went forward. The yoke went forward. The plane went down.
Why did it take so long to learn this? I feel like this would have been immediately knowable.
Yeah, so we knew this a while ago. And I actually think we talked about this a while ago. But now we have a final report that lays it out in detail with, we've got computer-generated graphics of the 787 pilot seat. We've got rocker switch and cap imagery that's circled and arrowed, and it's a much longer report than I thought it would be. But hey, we needed to know exactly how this happened. So unfortunately, one of the cabin crew members on the flight needed to be hospitalized because of the resulting in-flight upset. But this is not the first time this has happened. You're supposed to use an adhesive to fix that cap in place so that you can't do what this flight attendant did. Unfortunately, that adhesive was not used on this particular cap.
I feel like a lot of modern issues with aircraft like this are just caused by the stupidest little things, like, oh, the switch that moves the pilot's chair wasn't protected and it was pressed and the pilot was pushed into the yoke, or pilot spilt a drink on the console and the engines turned off, or just these we've weeded out so many things that could go wrong, that the only things that seem to go wrong these days are the absolute stupidest, dumbest things that nobody's ever thought about before, but just somehow find a way to keep happening.
Yeah. Well, the next time somebody does something stupid, we will bring it to you here first.
Not saying that the flight attendant was stupid. The design might be stupid.
The sequence of events.
Yes, the sequence of events is stupid.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just miraculous that that's happened like multiple times.
At the moment that we are recording, there is a very special aircraft in the air. Lufthansa's 747-8I is in the air wearing its brand new 100th anniversary livery. I'm very excited to see this one. I'm
good.
very, very excited to see this one.
It looks good. I think it is possibly the best one yet.
It's my favorite of the renderings so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing.
Oh no, we've seen. There are actual pictures of it today. Lufthansa put out a press release.
Not in the air.
Oh, in the air.
That's what I'm excited about.
Oh, I see. Well, we have pictures today from on the ground in San Bernardino, California, where it is taken off 47 minutes ago as of recording. But I love how simply into this Lufthansa is. It's not just, oh, we're painting some aircraft and like, here they are. No, this press release that they put out today, like the 19th of these press releases, but it's a 747, so it's more special. It celebrates this. It says not just that it happened and that it's on the way home. It says that this aircraft is scheduled to land on the airport's center runway, clearly visible to spotters, journalists, and fans. And they give you the exact time and the registration and how to track the aircraft. And clearly there was a lot of thought and a lot of planning ahead, and they want people to see it. It's not just a thing that they did for a press release. No, they're saying, go out and see this thing. It's even going to land on the airport's center runway in Frankfurt for the most possible visibility. You'll love to see it.
I do love to see it. And as we were talking, the first photo just came across on Jet Photos.
That was quick.
And it looks so good.
Can I see it? I
just sent it to you. It looks so good.
Oh, you did? Oh,
it'll be in the show notes. It'll be in the show notes.
That looks really good. The 748 is like the perfect proportion for this.
So we were working in Germany this week with Lufthansa on a separate project. And they said, hey, what if you stuck around for an extra day and then you could be airside for the arrival?
I don't remember getting that invite.
So Gabe's there this week. He will be airside to capture the arrival of this aircraft tomorrow morning. I'm very excited to see that. So that link will also be in the show notes, and you can watch that because I'm super excited. All right, let's get to the last few things on the show, and we will be off and call this another good episode. There's hope for the MAX 10. Maybe, sort of. We now see that a new, eventually, to WestJet 737 MAX 10 is flying. That aircraft first flew when, Jason?
A long time ago. What I can tell you is that Boeing has 8 MAX 10s on the ground. And I'm pulling this quote directly from Air Insight, who put a great article and first raised this. But apparently the oldest aircraft first flew 1,720 days ago on June 18th, 2021. And that aircraft, destined for United, is obviously still on the ground. But we are now at the half-decade mark between first flight for this aircraft and now. Who knows how long it could be before this particular frame is delivered. But the fact that a WestJet MAX 10 is up there doing something is good news, because they have a lot on order, like nearly 100, I think, which is kind of crazy for WestJet. But I think they might have the most vested interest in the MAX 10 at this point, more than anyone else.
Let's hope they get their aircraft. Elsewhere, we have Lufthansa Technik celebrating the completion of its 1,000th Pratt & Whitney geared turbofan engine overhaul. So 1,000 down.
So many more. So many more to go. They've pulled out all the stops. They have so many different facilities, and they wanted everyone to know that they have overhauled 1,000 Pratt & Whitney GTF engines, and it seemingly hasn't made a dent at all.
Well, one at a time.
Progress is progress.
Progress is progress. And last but certainly not least, because now you know where to avoid these aircraft next, it looks like China Southern has found a buyer for its much unloved 787-8s. And it sounds like it's Thai Airways?
Yeah, maybe. People are putting some bits and pieces together, but Flight Global says that Thai Airways confirms plans to lease 10 787-8s. And a couple bloggers put together, well, hey, wait, where could those possibly come from? Oh, well, China Southern just got rid of 10 787-8s to a leasing company. And that same leasing company apparently leased them out to Thai Airways. So, hey, more terrible teens, I believe, for Thai Airways. They'll take airplanes from anyone at this point. But these are true terrible 787-8s that nobody, not even China Southern, wants. Do you know how old are these? Some of the absolute original? Were these actual terrible teens?
You know what? I don't know if these are actual terrible teens.
If not, they are very close to it.
Yeah.
I don't believe they have any Dash 8s in their fleet anymore. Actually, no, they are not terrible teens, but they're in the 30s, 40s, 90s, and 100s. So they're not the oldest, but they are far from the newest Dash 8s.
They're not the oldest, but they're not the newest for sure.
No,
okay, fair enough.
These airplanes were back when China Southern was putting in big title livery on the side 787 because they were so proud to take delivery of these aircraft, but they ain't so proud anymore.
Oh, well,
sad.
Maybe they'll be proud again one day.
Sure.
Well, Jason, I'm proud of you and I'm proud of us because we made it to the end of the show. So let's hope that next week the news is a little bit better, but even if it's not, we'll be here to talk about it. This has been episode 360 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.